this is not, you know, we might call it a Tory-led coalition or a coalition government, but they are being more radical than Thatcher ever was, particularly in relation to their approach to ordinary workers. And we are battling on every single front right now. So, I mean, I think, you know, I would acknowledge that we didn't get everything that we wanted from the previous Labour government, but we did make a number of steps forward. And, you know, we would never have had something like the national minimum wage with a government like this. We would never have extended reduced the qualifying period for taking an unfair dismissal claim, because we were the party that actually took that down to 1 year, and it's the Tories who are now seeking to move it back to 2. We would never have had extended maternity-paternity rights, and we need to really focus on, you know, what this government is going to do and how we respond to that, because we are fighting on all fronts. I think it is about protecting the rights that we've got, unity, influencing where we can, taking responsibility and being organised. And just very quickly on each of those, I mean, I think in terms of protecting those rights, we are seeing, you know, an unprecedented assault on working rights. So you've got the qualification period for unfair dismissal, obviously the announcements today on reducing maternity and paternity rights. You've got legal funding for employment law advice, pre-employment tribunal, which has been withdrawn. You've seen cuts to the Union Modernisation Fund and the Learning Fund. On every front, they are trying to reduce and using a spurious argument that these are barriers to growth whilst they do it. We can't allow them to win that argument. It's, I think, the first thing that I would say we need to do. And then I think that, you know, I do think it's true that out of you know, powerlessness, a feeling of powerlessness, we can form good politics, and that good politics is about you know, uniting with that common agenda to protect what we have. And we've seen some very good examples recently from different organisations who have come together around specific issues and mobilise not just their own members but the wider community in doing so. And you'll have to look at you know, UK Uncut, for example, to see some of the excellent mobilisation that they have been able to achieve, and the very good press coverage that has gone with it. And that press coverage is not incidental, because that does help us win the battle of the hearts and minds of the wider public. Because we can say all the right things all we want, but unless actually we have a medium within which to reach out to non-members of the Labour Party and non-members of trade unions, we're not going to win the battle. But we are stronger together than we are apart. And, you know, I think, you know, my second plea would be that we are united as a movement ourselves, and I mean as a movement, as a trade union movement first and foremost, but also as a labour movement. And I think what I've seen firsthand, being a member of the Labour Party's National Executive, I've visited 25 constituencies in the course of the last 2 months, and what I've seen there is that, you know, many trade unions pay local affiliation fees to constituency Labour parties, and that money is very welcome in terms of boosting the campaign funds of local parties, but none of them, or very, very few, send their delegates to local CLP meetings. So what we don't have in local constituency Labour Party meetings is a trade union voice explaining the very difficult negotiating environment that our unions find themselves in at the moment. And I think if, you know, the wider Labour Party, because, you know, not all members of the Labour Party are members of trade unions, as much as we would like that to be the case, but those people who are not members of trade unions don't always understand, you know, the complex negotiations that take place across different organisations, don't understand sometimes why we do end up on the front page, you know, promoting industrial action in a particular company. So they do read, you know, the press stories, which are predominantly negative when it comes to trade unions, because they're not our friends and haven't been for a very long time. So what we need to do is ensure that there is engagement built in at the start of that process. And I think the other thing that I would say is that that does allow the union movement the opportunity, or more opportunities, to influence policy within the Labour Party. And we shouldn't forget that that is important also, because we will on occasion have a difference of views about the best direction within which to take our politics in terms of protecting workers. But the greater influence that there is, and the greater engagement there is, the greater possibility that trade unions' priorities will be reflected in the policy of the Labour Party. So I would just urge you to ensure that there is that engagement at the start. I'd just end by saying that, you know, I know that a lot of local constituents in Labour Party meetings are not that warm and welcoming, and we've all had our own unique experiences and the characters that can sometimes develop, but that's something that the Labour Party is looking to change as well. We're consulting you know, our trade union affiliates and the wider Labour Party about how we make policy to try and ensure that members have a bigger voice and affiliates have a bigger voice, but also just looking at the way that we do things so that actually we can have better membership engagement at the start.
Thank you very much.
There were some absolutely brilliant examples of where unions have been working in partnership, whether they called it that or not, with employers to bring in some really profound changes. And this, every union, this is absolutely, I mean, Asdor, you know, at a factory, the Unilever factory in Leeds, some changes there, incredibly interesting, totally devolving management, affects self-managed teams, a completely new way of running manufacturing. Unite, an absolutely amazing set of workplace changes happening within British Aerospace, where the union is absolutely at the forefront of being involved in these those sort of changes. I could point you to the public sector unison. There are excellent examples of this, but unfortunately, in my view, they are all too few. And I mean, it seems to me that this is part. I mean, I may not make myself very popular by saying this. Obviously, demonstrating is very important. Taking action at the end of the day to reassure people about their rights is incredibly important. But I think that we'll be making a huge mistake if we think that that's a strategy for growth for the trade union movement. I think it is essentially a defensive strategy, just as I think the Labour Party, and I worked in Untemp for Tony Blair for 7 years, so you know, I say this in all comradeship, but I think the Labour Party will be making a very big mistake if it thinks that it's going to win by default. Because the Tories are unpopular, and so you know, the swing will come our way. I mean, and I think if it did, it would be catastrophic too, because I think that there's some really fundamental thinking that needs to happen, and that's why Unions 21 is so important, because just as it was when it was established, you know, it's the place where we can have these discussions where nobody feels, you know, by saying this kind of stuff that they're going to be, you know, held down as a betrayer. Like Bob Crow and so on. It's incredibly important, you know, we come to grips with some of this stuff, because otherwise what's going to happen is this: we are going to end up with the old demands for the next Labour manifesto. Repeal the Tory trade union laws. I mean, you know, we could be absolutely not moving forward if we don't understand that. One, in my view, the key way to growth for the trade union movement, and I'm a member of the NUJ and the Unite, and it's a subject that remains absolutely dear to my heart, is that you have to be in a position where you are reflecting the real lives of people at work and not the world as you wish it to be. And I think we still, until we have a root and branch conversation, or continue the root and branch, and we are having it, but until we have that root and branch conversation, then I think there's some difficult things we have to face. I mean, when the government says, any government says, and you know, you will know that New Labour and Tony Blair resisted many of the things that eventually came into the workplace on the grounds that they would be they would have an effect on productivity. Now, I mean, in my view, it's no good the union movement simply saying, oh, I'm not even going to engage in that argument. I mean, what about the argument which says, what do we think about the fact that workplaces with under, say, 7 or 5 people, should all the legislation that applies to people at work? Should it, all of it, absolutely apply in those workplaces? Is that going to have an effect of deterring jobs? See, I just think that we need to be honest and get engaged in these kind of difficult conversations and not simply have wishes, I guess is what I'm saying. And to think that it's when we engage in those difficult conversations, about challenges that perhaps we'd rather not acknowledge, what is the trade-off between keeping wages down and keeping people in employment? These are difficult things. So, I just think that we need to carry on having these difficult conversations, and I think that Unions 21 is a brilliant place to keep having them, and absolutely more part of their album.
Nita always challenging us to go further. Paul, if you'd like to come in and give us a perspective, how can we improve workplaces under the Tory government?
Okay, thank you. I think in answering the question, though, we need to remember some things. I think. And the first is that governments change. Governments come and go. When I first came into the union movement in 1982, we had at that time what was considered the most reactionary government we'd ever had in our history. And I don't want people to misunderstand that, and I don't want people to feel that the nature of the government is not important. Of course it is. Of course it is. But the trade union movement is extremely resilient, and I think we need to remember what our strengths are. We have more than 6 million members. There's no other organisation in the UK, or worldwide for that matter, that people join on a voluntary basis that is so diverse, that has so many different occupations, so many different types of people in it. And I think we should not forget that strength, that we've been through this before. Okay, we have had some knockbacks, but we're there and we continue to do our job, which is fundamentally to represent working people in their workplace. So I'd just like to make a few general points, and then, if I may, just comment specifically on what we're doing in our industry. And I fully accept that our industry may not be typical, and it may not be that too many lessons can really cross. But what we are fundamentally as a union, apart from a few areas, we're fundamentally a private sector union that has a density of about 80% membership. So maybe our experience is of interest. I think what we should do is, first of all, we shouldn't feel that we're on the back foot, and we shouldn't feel that our only role at the moment as a trade union movement is to limit the damage. I think we should be more confident than that, and I think we should remember that our history, if you look at our history, the circumstances we're in at the moment are not unusual in the movement's history, and that we do more than limit the damage, even in the very challenging and damaging circumstances that this particular government are placing us in. Those challenges, of course, are the cuts that are being made in the public sector, the declining workforce, employers trying to hold down wages unnecessarily, in my opinion, for a second year, at least a second year running. Employers, having got used to inflation being low, are sort of using the same techniques that they used then to apply when inflation is growing. So they're huge challenges. The other challenge that we've got to face, I think, is that we have to fight against this concept that Britain is successful globally by being low cost, low wage, unskilled economy. And I think that that's when we have to remind ourselves what are our priorities. And I've just scribbled down some. It's not supposed to be an exhaustive list, but I've listed a few that I think are certainly my union's priorities. And at the top of that list, I think at the moment, is protecting job security. I think hand in hand with that are ensuring that our members of unions receive the right terms and conditions, the appropriate terms and conditions for the skills that they have, that they shouldn't be artificially held down, and the deficit be used as a means of holding those down. I think our objectives remain to ensure that there's equality in the workplace. I think one of the key objectives for many unions is to ensure that training and the ability for working people to acquire skills is not compromised by what is happening at the moment. And of course the protection of pensions and I use that in its widest term. I think we need to ensure as a movement that people will have that right to decide when they want to retire and have a decent income when they take that decision. So how do we deliver on those objectives in the workplace? And that's where I guess what I say is a bit specific to our industry. But I do believe that we do have to engage with employers. I do believe that we do have to work with employers, because I actually believe that there are two sorts of employers. There are those employers who believe themselves that what they want is a low-wage, low-cost, low-skilled, deregulated economy, because they can only compete in those circumstances because they're not actually very good at what they do. But I think there are many employers who actually see the benefits of a skilled workforce, of an economy that is regulated in a way that that allows competition to work on the basis of thank you, I'm relieved about that. That allows the economy to allows competition to work on the basis of quality and being better. And I think if we engage with those employers, we actually find that there are aspects of our agenda that they also share. So to sum up, I think we shouldn't be on the back foot. I think we should recognise where others share our interests, and we should work hard. And if we do, we can continue to do what we've always done: protect job security, protect wages, and fundamentally to protect the skills of our members.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. They're all great contributions. I want to take as many from the floor as possible, but we try and take 3.